And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, Oregon football and recruiting insider over at Scoop Duck on 3. But today we are coming at you with a hoops edition of the Ducks Dish podcast because it has been a very eventful offseason in Eugene for Dana Altman and the Ducks. But before we get to that, the Ducks Dish podcast is brought to you in part by Ranchito Grill. Check out Ranchito Grill in Springfield. Not sure what your dinner plans are tonight, but head on over to Ranchito at 1537 Mohawk Boulevard. Try their homemade tortillas. They got great food, a great environment, and they will take care of you. Head on over there and say what's up to Ruben and let them know that Max Torres sent you. Not rolling solo on today's episode of the pod. I got my guy Collin King, former Ducks Digest writer, here on the pod. Collin and I worked a little bit together at my last spot, and he's my hoops guy. So because we've had an eventful offseason, who better to bring on the pod than my guy Collin? How we doing, man? It's been way too long.
Yeah, it's been a really, really long time. Finished up freshman year at Louisville, ready to get back into it.
Nice, man. Well, glad you got that year one under your belt. Feels like pretty early to be back from school. I didn't usually end until like mid-May. But that's just how it goes. I don't know about Louisville, so
Yeah,
they just
Kentucky
roll.
Derby.
There you go.
Kentucky
There you
Derby, man.
go.
There we go.
Well, yeah, man. Stoked to have you on the pod. We're coming at you if you guys are listening to this on the Scoop Duck YouTube channel as well. So reminder to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. We're trying to run those numbers up and build this community here, get this channel rolling. But yeah, man, let's get into the first news item of the day, the freshest one for the Ducks. That is former Villanova guard TJ Bamba announced his commitment to the Oregon Ducks on Thursday. Man, this is seems like another big addition for Dana Altman and company. What can you tell me?
Yeah, so TJ Bamba is a guy that Oregon actually pursued last year when he hit the portal. He was coming from Washington State. I don't know if folks remember that at Washington State, Bamba actually carved up Oregon in the Pac-12 tournament game, as well as a road game that he, I believe, dropped 20 some. And he really, I mean, Oregon's getting a great player. He's a great defender, 3-level scorer. The 3-point shooting is definitely something that Oregon wants to put more of an emphasis on. He's got 36% this past season. I think he can get even better than that. And he has a knack for steals. Not really a great passer, but he's going to be playing the shooting guard role, so the 2 spot. And that's kind of where he's, I guess, been his entire career. And Oregon, I mean, I think they really hit a home run with this one, along with the addition that they got earlier, which we'll mention in a little bit. But I think they really hit a home run, and they got a great start at the guard, they brought back their guys, and then they also got the 2 in the transfer portal, and they're set up pretty well at guard now. And honestly, the whole team looks pretty nice. But Bamba, I really love Bamba. Like, I'm a big fan of Bamba's. I was hoping that we would get him the last time he was in the cycle, or last time he was in the portal. And this time they hit it with Stubblefield helping out. So I think this is a big win.
Yeah, it seems like it's one of your favorite additions so far, Colin. I know with Bamba, when I was texting you about him, you were saying that was like the first thing with that he was an awesome defender, which I feel like is perfect for Dana Altman because a lot of his best teams have featured really good defenders. And I watched a little bit of highlights of Bamba earlier today, and he seems like he can really get after it and attack the rim. So it'll be fun to see how he kind of fits into this Oregon team heading into 2024. As we all know, the Ducks did see some attrition via the transfer portal at the guard spot, right? With Brennan Rigsby hitting the portal and committing to Minnesota just a little bit ago. And then Cario Oquendo as well. I know he hit the portal, and I want to say he ended up at SMU. You can correct me if I'm wrong there, but yeah, another addition for Dana Altman and the Ducks. And maybe this is just kind of more of a generic question, Colin, before we get to our next guy. What do you make of kind of how Dana Altman has struck a balance between the portal and high school rankings? Because I feel like that's a different kind of formula than it is for football.
Yeah, so Dana's started definitely with this cycle. I think, and he's tried to in past cycles and kind of struck out on big targets. He's tried to put more of an emphasis on the transfer portal rather than high school recruiting. Obviously, he saw what happened with the five-star in Kalal Ware. He ended up transferring out after one season. He doesn't really want to replicate that again. And it's not necessarily just because of Kalal Ware, but also because of players maybe not panning out. And why not go out and get somebody who's already proven? He's done this obviously with JUCO ranks. He loves JUCO, the guys from the JUCO ranks, and he loves getting players that are proven. And you know that with some of the better teams and some of the recent success, players coming that are transfers have come in, have helped this team immensely. You look at LJ Figueroa, you look at Eugene Omarui. Obviously, Chris Duarte was from the JUCO ranks. Those are guys in particular on one of the better teams recently that you look at and you say, okay, Dana built this team with those transfers as the core, and that's how he made his team, rather than the recruits who you saw there were some players that maybe didn't get as much time. Frank Kepnong, for example, was a pretty highly touted guy. He didn't play much on that team, and he ended up transferring out. So it's just an example, I guess. I'm not necessarily saying that's his plan. That's just my take on what his plan may be. But I think he's starting to adapt, which is something that Oregon fans had kind of been hoping he would do. Use the transfer portal more. And he reached out to a lot of players early on, which is something he hasn't really done in years past. Reach out to some top talents in the transfer portal for sure. And now we're at a spot where he can kind of pick and choose. So with only a few spots left, right? So with that being said, he has also, though, gotten ahead in the 2025 and gotten Isaac Carr, who's a homegrown kid, and hopefully will be a pretty good player for us. You know that the last homegrown kid who we have currently on the team is pretty dang good. So that's just, I guess, where I feel the transfer portal will continue to have like an uptick for Dana as well, though. He's going to continue to use that more and more. It's just kind of how the college landscape is now. But I could also see, I guess, because of the NIL commitment that they've had recently, they kind of uptick that as more as well. So I think that's also attributed to success.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, it's interesting to kind of peel back the layers there because I think, like I was saying, the approach from a football perspective is a little bit different because with basketball, I think you still want to go after those top flight guys, maybe like even like the one and done tier kind of players. But maybe we've seen a little bit too much investment in those kind of guys. I'm not sure if that's making sense, but it seems like you want to go with some more of the proven commodities even if it's not necessarily that splashy guy. Is that kind of what I'm hearing from you, Colin?
A little bit, yeah. But I also forgot to mention, I mean, you look at Infali Dante. He's a guy who was a five-star. He had a rough time early on in his career, but he ended up, I'd say, panning out pretty well. So, and that's a guy who we'll probably mention a little bit later, but there are guys that definitely work out as high-ranking players. It's just that the way that the college landscape is, the way that teams have to adapt now with NIL and the transfer portal, it's really insane, and coaches have to figure out some way to work it out, and that's just kind of the way that Dan has started to work it out.
I think when you have a coach, regardless of what the sport is, you want to have someone that's open to adapting and not stuck in their ways. And I know with Oregon fans in particular, maybe they weren't the happiest with Dana Altman this season because they had their struggles. Particularly, I think a lot of that was probably due to injury. So Dana can only do so much. But hey, it's like Rothstein says, right? His name is Dana Altman. He aligns Rubik's cubes, and they got that thing together when it mattered the most, and they made the NCAA tournament. Let's keep it rolling here, Colin. Talk about transfer portal edition number 2. Changing up the positions, we got Brandon Angel, power forward guy out of Stanford, originally from the San Diego area. Torrey Pines, I think he's got 1 year of eligibility remaining. This is another guy that I think fans were pretty excited to see join the fold. What can you tell us about Brandon Angel and kind of how you think he fits into this next squad?
Yeah, so Oregon can expect a guy who can play the 3 through the 5, I guess, as a small ball 5. He's going to provide this team with a lot of versatility. He's a great three-point shooter, 40% this past season. And that's something that Oregon fans in particular really wanted. That's something that Dana Altman said he really wanted as well. Put some emphasis on that. The pure shooter is something that Oregon hasn't had in a little while. You think back maybe Anthony Mathis, for example, as maybe one of the last ones. But really a pure shooter who can also defend. is able to be physical down low as well. I think that's really what Oregon was looking for. And also, I mean, some sort of versatility, like stretch the floor while also being able to play defense on the other side and overall just be a plus player. That's what they didn't really necessarily have. They have kind of with Kwame, but they wanted a more proven, I guess, version of Kwame, who is also a better three-point shooter. And they definitely got that, I think, with Brandon Angel. And I think this is going to be one that Oregon fans love. They're also going to ask him to have some sort of uptick in his three-point, I guess, shot attempts. So that is something that they're going to be leaning on for sure. But this is a guy that, as I said, could definitely be a fan favorite.
Yeah, with his 3-point shooting, that's something that I kind of get excited about because the Ducks shot 33.8% from the 3-point line last year as a team. And you want to have those shooters, but I think you also want to have a team that isn't complacent with settling for outside shots or three-pointers. So you want to have an aggressive team as well. And I think Dana Altman does a great job of just bringing in good athletes, guys that can do a lot of different things. So when you couple the return of Kwame Evans Jr. with the addition of a guy like Brandon Angel, I think that you got to feel pretty good about that forward spot of your Dana Altman.
And something to mention right now as well that I didn't mention for Bamba, along with Angel as well. Yeah, I mean, they get to the bucket. That's what they do. They're able to get to the bucket and definitely draw fouls and get to the line. And they're both plus free throw shooters as well. So that's something that obviously Oregon fans in particular have been kind of hoping Oregon would go out and get a free throw shooter. Bamba in particular, I believe he's 87% from the line, which is something great for Oregon because there were a lot of missed free throws this past season and in years past.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I remember because I wrote up a story for Scoop Duck when Brandon Angel committed. I was looking for things to include in the story and kind of what was important or noteworthy. And I know that Brandon Angel was a guy that was really, really solid from the free throw line. And that's something that I think a lot of Oregon fans are going to appreciate, right? When you factor in the struggles that they had from the free throw line in recent years. But before we move to our next guy, Colin, is there anything else you wanted to add on Angel? I didn't want to rush through him.
No, I mean, I think he's a great player. I mean, I've kind of already said that I think he could be a fan favorite, right? And it's just, I guess, how that production works as he moves to a better team. Because he was on Stanford last year, it wasn't a great team. Um, but how, I guess, he adapts to that role because he's probably going to play slightly less minutes than he did at Stanford. And they're also going to ask him to shoot more threes. So I wonder how that kind of ends up working out. But regardless, I think it's a very solid addition.
Moving right along, let's talk about the third transfer portal edition for Dana Altman and the Oregon Ducks. That is former Toledo guard Raheem Moss. He commits to Oregon, originally out of Springfield, Ohio. I think he has 2 more years of eligibility with the Ducks.
I believe it's just one.
Just one? Okay, my bad. Just 1 year of eligibility with the Ducks. What can you tell us about Raheem Moss and how you think he's going to impact this year's squad?
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure about the eligibility. I think it's just one. But however, Raheem Moss is a guy that can definitely be very physical down low, which is something that as a guard, you don't necessarily expect, but it's something that Oregon wants because they want to draw more free throw attempts. And this is a guy, unfortunately, that is not a great 3-point shooter. However, you saw when Oregon went out and got Jermaine Couisnard, obviously he had a very, very good end of the season this year, but he was still only a 34% 3-point shooter. He arrived worse, ended better from the 3-point line, but they're kind of hoping he takes some sort of stride in his 3-point percentage, such as what Couisnard did. He's also a shooting guard, just like TJ Bamba is. Not really sure who's going to start there. I think that's kind of up for an open discussion, but they're both going to play significant minutes from what I'm feeling right now. Another guy who's a pretty solid free throw shooter at 75%, and he can also get a decent amount of boards as well. He averaged 5 this past year, 5.4. And this is also a guy that could potentially play, I guess, somewhat a point guard. He's a good enough passer to play there. It's not going to be his, I guess, designated role or anything by any means, but he is able to still be a solid passer. So he's a great defender. That's what I haven't mentioned so far. He was on the all-defensive team in the MAC conference, which is huge. And, I mean, this is, again, another guy who can play defense, who can be physical. That's really the consistent thing that Oregon continues to add.
Yeah, guys that can do a lot of different things. I mean, you're never hurting yourself when you get guys that can do a lot of different stuff. So for the guard play here, Colin, Shelstad comes back. Jackson Shelstad's back for his sophomore season. That's key. The Ducks lose Jermaine Cousinard, but it sounds like Keyshawn Bartholomew could come back for one more year. Is that correct?
He's returning, yep.
He's returning. Okay, cool. No, seriously, thanks for keeping me up to date on this stuff. I definitely wish I had a better ear to the ground with basketball. Jadrian Tracy's going to be back, right? He's a redshirt junior a year ago, so feels like the depth is rounding into form for Dana Altman at the guard spot, both guard spots.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, for the entire roster, really, you are going to have a tough task, it seems, at this point of replacing a bunch of seniors next year. That's just kind of how it seems right now. Obviously, I'm not really sure where we stand with Raheem Moss in terms of his eligibility. I'll try to figure that out after, but for sure, they're going to have some guys leaving. So obviously, Bamba after the year will be gone. Potentially Moss. You're going to have Brandon Angel, who's going to be a one and done for Oregon. Keyshawn will be gone after the season. Nate Biddle will be gone after the season, and a few others as well. I believe a few others. Yeah, Jadrian Tracy, I think, will actually be gone potentially after the season as well. I have to verify that as well. But there's going to be a lot of guys replaced. But I think what they've done so far has already made this team immensely better than it was last season. And maybe even the biggest part isn't even actually out yet. So, or rather, it is out, but it's not 100% happening. So obviously, we have maybe teased at it a little bit, but we'll probably mention it a little bit later in the pod. But yeah, I think Moss, going back to Moss, I mean, he's going to be a really good player for Oregon. Another guy that obviously you hope to see the strides from 3-point. But regardless of if he can make the stride there, he's still going to be a pretty good player for Oregon. And at very least.
Oh, can you hear me okay, Colin? I think I might have lost you there for a second.
No, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know what I might have been tripping on Raheem Moss because his Toledo bio from last year says he was a junior, so probably only 1 year of eligibility left. But we'll have to make sure we get all of our facts straight. We're coming to you on the Scoop Duck YouTube channel, talking some Oregon hoops with my guy Collin King. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Glad you're here. Thank you for being here on today's episode. We've been teasing it kind of like you talked about, Colin, but I mean, most people probably know what we're talking about. Oregon center and Folly Dante. Looks like he's applying for another year of eligibility, another waiver. I guess is probably the more significant professional terminology. This was a development that came out last week, I think, but had kind of been getting talked about behind the scenes, like on message boards and stuff for quite a while. What can you tell us there?
Yeah, so this is something that was actually told to me a few weeks back, and I didn't really believe it at first. I was like, there's no way. There's no way he can actually come back, right? And, the more I thought about it, the more I looked at it, realized that obviously he missed significant time, obviously, with the 2 ACL tears. And I looked and I was like, okay, he actually can come back. I didn't know if, obviously, that waiver A1 would be accepted. And I don't know, obviously, like 2 being the fact that he could even apply for that. I think that's obviously a huge thing, obviously, for Oregon because of the fact that you saw how he broke out at the end of the season. Well, not even broke out. The entire season, he was great. It's more the fact that in the tournament, he went ballistic. It was what we saw in the first game, the Georgia game, where he dropped 23 and I think 20 boards. That is insane. That was the first game of the season, set the tone, but then he got hurt. So if Oregon can have him healthy for an entire season, this team should be looked at as a Big Ten contender for sure in year 1 in the Big Ten. And it's kind of crazy the time that we're in now that Oregon, obviously in the Big Ten, and has potential to be a contender in both football and basketball at the same exact time.
That would be something super special, no doubt about it. And if Oregon can get another year out of Folly, that's huge, right? You were just getting into it. He's kind of the nucleus of this team his intensity and the energy that he brings to the floor is something that I think is contagious, and guys obviously feed off of. He can work the pick and roll. He can defend the rim. I think he can do a little bit of everything, and he really sets the tone for this squad. I did get to interview him a couple times when I was still living out in Eugene, so he kind of seems like he's got some good energy, and he's kind of a funny guy at times as well. So I think that would be a benefit just to get another year of that, just that energy and really help build the culture there for Dana Altman.
Yeah, and Dante's a great person. He truthfully is a amazing person. I haven't been out to Eugene to talk with him myself. However, from what I can view here, everything's great, and he's a great person for the community. He's always I think, a very solid, like morals. His morals are great. His character overall, and he gives back to people as well, which is another thing that um, I think is a big reason because he's such a big part of the community why he should get another waiver. Obviously, I'm not going to lobby for that, but I hope that he does. Right? I can't tell the NCAA, hey, here's why he should get it. But um, and Fally Dante being back, I mean, just it really changes this team because without him, center, you have Nate Biddle still, right? I mean, it's not like they're going to be completely bare. It's not like they're going to be screwed if he doesn't. But you still have Nate Biddle. You have the incoming Ibrahima Traore. I think if Infali Dante comes in, Traore could potentially redshirt and get another year out of him. But Infali Dante, like you said, he really is the nucleus. I mean, he's a great shot blocker. And it's also obviously his offensive game, great rebounder. It's really, can he stay healthy? And that's what Oregon fans are hoping to get. A full season out of Infali Dante would be amazing. Um, I don't know. I mean, I don't really know what else to add on him except for the fact that it's just going to be something huge if Oregon gets him back. Um, like I kind of have been teasing at it. I mean, hoping and praying like that it does happen. But with the NCAA, we understand that sometimes the decisions don't really go your way. So it's one of those things that we kind of just have to wait. And I don't really have a timetable right now. From what I've heard, it could take weeks, it could take months. So that's a bummer. Obviously, I can't really say when it's going to happen. But Oregon fans, just there is hope.
All right, well, we'll see what happens moving forward with that waiver, and hope to hear some kind of word one way or the other sooner rather than later. Colin, we've talked about a lot of players so far, and I have a couple more items that I want to get into with you on this episode of the pod. But any more stuff you want to talk about, just as far as the roster construction, guys we haven't mentioned very much. I just kind of wanted to give you the floor before we kind of move on to some other items.
One guy I think that's not really being talked about a whole lot is redshirt freshman Mookie Cook. So last year he was hurt, didn't play a whole lot before he was shut down for the season with that injury. I think he's kind of being overlooked a little bit, even by myself, because I haven't seen him healthy really. Obviously, I saw his high school film, but I'm kind of wondering what his role is compared to maybe a Jadrian Tracy or a Desrick Lindsey, because last year obviously Mookie Cook wasn't very involved. So I wonder what the incoming JUCO guy in Desert Lindsey is going to have, like what role he'll have, and then also in terms of JJ and Tracy, he may seem kind of like an odd man out ish in terms of rotation right now, depending on how Mookie Cook returns. So expect Oregon to still add probably one more player, and then if Infali Dante does not return and that waiver gets denied, then they will have to add potentially a second, or they will convert one of their walk-ons to a scholarship guy.
Okay, so we'll continue to track those developments and see what comes out of Eugene as this Oregon roster kind of takes shape ahead of next year. I think it's interesting to look at that those guys like Jadrian Tracy, or even like what happens with Mookie Cook moving into their I think their respective second years with the program. So it's I guess you'd like to have a little bit more clarity about what you can maybe expect out of those guys, but that's just a natural part of the offseason. You don't know what everyone's role is going to look like. You have to see how they all play together, how they play off of each other, things like that. One of the other topics I wanted to get into, another big development in Eugene, not necessarily personnel related or roster related, but the Ducks got Tony Stubblefield back after he served as the head coach at DePaul for, I think it was 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years, however many years it was. He's back on the staff, and I think this was a unique story because it seemed like Dana Altman was kind of calling for him to come back almost publicly throughout the year. And I'm not really sure if that's that common in college basketball. So what do you make of the Tony Stubblefield return, and how much do you think it's going to impact this team?
Yeah, so publicly calling for him to return definitely is something that's not really commonly seen. Um, but he was at the Pac-12 tournament every single game there. He went to the NCAA tournament games as well. And it was kind of expected that he would rejoin the team in some capacity. Obviously, as an assistant coach, that's big. He's a familiar face, right? He recruited very, very well in his time at Oregon. He was key in developing some big time players for Oregon as well. Um, there's too many to name right now, so I'm not going to name them all, but he was very, very pivotal in that sense. And overall, I think that having him back has already paid dividends. I think that his recruiting and how he navigates the transfer portal has already paid off. And I think that's part of the reason they've already gotten some of the players they've gotten. But going forward, I think you can expect better prep recruiting as well. That was kind of his thing, I think, in his time at Oregon. Um, was more so than Dana Altman in the prep scene. But the portal should also still pay dividends. And I think having him back can only help. He was a very, very good coach in his time here, maybe just not a great head coach. Obviously, DePaul is a very, very tough situation, right? But maybe he wasn't ready for that, or maybe there was just a bunch of issues there at DePaul that he couldn't really control. So having him back is really big. And I guess really kind of helps out Oregon's recruiting, on the court coaching too, making adjustments. Sometimes there weren't really any adjustments made this season, and you look and you maybe think, okay, how can he come in and help that? And in his time like when he was here at Oregon, Oregon made better adjustments for sure, and it's something I had to go back and watch because I honestly kind of forgot it. But they made way better adjustments than they did in the past 2 seasons. So him back on the sideline, coaching is really, really positive for Oregon.
I think getting another pair of eyes on the team is only going to help, like you said, and a familiar one at that. Someone who knows how Altman functions and knows what the best version of Oregon basketball looks like, right? So I think that's great. I also think that even though he didn't have a tremendous amount of success as a head coach, I think that perspective is going to be valuable for him as he rejoins this staff. So I'm excited about the move for sure, and just to see how that can hopefully help Oregon kind of get back to their form, find their form a little earlier. Because I think as great as all the magic is for Dana Altman every single year, would it hurt to start the season strong? I don't think it would. So I'm not taking a shot at them at all. But I think Duck fans would probably agree with that, right? You don't want to be, hanging on the edge of your seat, not every year, but you'd rather just see them kind of find their groove and be more consistent earlier. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about, Collin, this is kind of just a fun one. I wish I had something to demonstrate it a little bit more, but the Matthew Knight Arena court is going to be getting a makeover this season. And I think that's kind of one of the under the radar stories of the offseason, for this basketball team. So first, I want to get your thoughts on the old court, because I feel like you either love it or you hate it. And what do you think are like the possibilities of this next court as they make their move to the Big Ten? I feel like the timing couldn't be better.
Yeah, so the old court, let's say it wasn't the most appealing on TV. And also certain channels made it look worse than it actually was. I know it's better in person, and probably the fans that actually go to the games would agree with that. However, I didn't hate it. I really didn't hate it. I think it was kind of an overhated court, but I'm also kind of excited to see a little bit of change. I feel like they could definitely make it more simplistic or something. It seems like that's a pretty popular trend now, that teams are going with something sort of simplistic, in most things that they do. And I wonder if some sort of gray, or like a gray court or something like that could be something that Oregon looks at. I believe that's something that Washington State has, if I recall. But I'm really excited to watch this, because honestly, I mean, I haven't really seen a team make a major switch on their court in a little while. So this is something that I'll definitely be watching, and definitely a fun one for sure. don't know what your thoughts on this are, Max.
Yeah, I think I would describe the old court as one that looked better in person than it did on TV. I can definitely say that. I wasn't a huge hoops guy, but while I was living in Eugene, I did have fun going to these games and covering them. And I think it's just an opportunity for a fresh start and to hopefully inject some more excitement and enthusiasm around the program and get better fan turnout. Maybe, I mean, that's not obviously the reason that people are going or aren't going to games, but it could definitely help them. So for I think if you're looking at just the rest of the country or even just the Big Ten, right? When you're looking at schools or teams that have just like awesome creatives and with the Nike connection, there's just endless possibilities. I feel like for what we could ultimately see with this Oregon court and what they can get from it. So I think the timing's great. I bet Dana Altman is somewhat excited about it just because it's an opportunity to generate more excitement around his team, around the sport, and then also obviously Kelly Graves with the women's basketball team. They're going to be playing on it as well. So I think it's a win for everybody involved. So I'm excited to see what this thing is going to look like. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's not really much we can do but speculate unless like some kind of designs get leaked or something.
Yeah, I mean, and also because you mentioned it about Dana Altman, he wanted more support. So I think this is just a way to garner more support, potentially get more buzz around the team, um, have more people come out, more students come out and actually support the team because that's something that Oregon's also lacked. So maybe with this new court, it'll create some sort of new excitement, or even the team itself will garner more excitement and bring even more students in, bring more fans, whatever. Because that's something that he's definitely harped about for a few years now.
Wanted to get some of your final thoughts here, Colin, before we wrap up today's show. Just final thoughts on this Oregon team heading into next year. We could get some thoughts on Dana Altman if you thought that people were being too harsh on him or not harsh enough. I know some people were saying that maybe he needs to get fired at some there's always mad fans. There's people that are more level headed. There's people that think everything's fine. Where do you lie? Because I feel like you're much more informed about hoops than I am. So I value your opinion.
I'll start with the roster about how I feel about that. I feel really good right now about it. There's going to be one more, obviously, player added, maybe two, depending on how Dante's waiver ends up being ruled on. Um, but I feel really good about it. I think this team should be, assuming they get Valley Dante back, should be a top 25 in the preseason polls. Obviously, polls don't really matter that early in the season, but I think with the roster construction that they definitely could be. Um, and you're also going to see the sophomore years from Jackson Shellstad, Kwame Evans, the, I guess, technically redshirt freshman season of Mookie Cook, and some final seasons for some players as well that maybe obviously Nate Biddle last year had a really rough year in terms of injuries, sickness, and all that. His return, how he bounces back. I think that it'll be very, very exciting to watch. Just praying for no injuries. That's a big thing. And then next to how I feel about Dana Altman. So if you follow me on my Instagram, you would have known that I was not the best in terms of how I critiqued him this season. I try to be a level-headed fan, and then there's other times when maybe adjustments aren't made, or it just seems like something isn't working for Oregon and it's not fixed, maybe, or even the injury issue. I took that as a way of maybe holding it against Dana. And I already have publicly said that Dana, I'm sorry. Like, he's not going to see it, but the fans that have asked me to say sorry, I've said sorry to. Because Dana Altman, he does align the Rubik's cubes. I just hope that he can get off to a better start. That way, he doesn't have to later on use that magic. It's one of those things that going forward, he's going to continue to be the great coach that he is. One of the best coaches in college basketball currently, and has been for some time now. Had a few down years, but I think he's kind of ready to come back, and he's kind of trying to show everybody that he's back.
There you go. There you have it. All right. All right. Well, before we wrap up here, Colin, let the people know where they can find you and kind of what you have going on in the Duck space.
Yeah, so on Instagram, you can find me at ducks.insider. And on X or Twitter, it is Insider Ducks. Those are my socials, and I'm hoping to continue to hopefully work with Max. Hopefully see more of me this summer. But yeah, that's all.
Right on, right on. Well, make sure you guys tap in with Collin. If you want to find more of me, you can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at mtorresports. Subscribe to the Scoop Duck on 3 YouTube channel. Head on over to scoopduck.com and give us a sub over there. You can try us out for 1 month for just $1 and share the show. Share the Ducks Dish podcast with your friends, with your family, and with other Duck fans. Big thank you to Collin for coming on and giving us some of his time. And thank you to you guys for tuning in and watching this episode. Don't usually take the hoops focus, but it's been an eventful offseason, so felt like it was a perfect time to bring Collin on. But yeah, a big thank you to everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.